to the report that you've read as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. And thanks very much to the team for inviting me to participate. Very much appreciate the opportunity. As indeed, I very much appreciate the report. For me, as a geographer, I came to engaging with issues of death and bereavement, like many other scholars in the broad field, through my own experience of bereavement. And initially, I was very conscious that space mattered in my own experience of bereavement and those immediately around me. However, for a while I attributed that to basically being a geography geek. I'm a geographer, I'm bound to think about spatial matters, aren't I? But some 5 years involvement with a county branch of a bereavement support group really highlighted to me that everybody had their own, not only their own story, but only their own map and their own context, and that this was often shared between families and communities as well, at least in part. And so I, with others, began to make an intervention within geography for geographers to offer more to say about the issues of death, dying, end of life, and so on, and also engaging with those already working in wider death studies to think about this. Now, fortunately, this coincided with an emotional turn within geography and also a bit of a spatial turn within the social sciences, and so that has catalysed, I think, quite well in encouraging people to explore these issues. And to me, in many ways, with my interest in the significance of space and place in our understanding of death and dying, and as a feminist geographer, being particularly interested in gendered analysis and also gender as an important part of empirical investigation, I see this project almost as being an ideal project in that the way in which it's combined a particular focus in a specific place, looking at Senegal, looking at a context as part of the global south, where certainly in terms of our literature within Western Europe and broader Anglophone academic communities, there is relatively little written and understood about broader understandings of everyday experience of death and dying. I think also it's been really important in actually exploring Senegal in detail and in particularity by looking at a specific urban context and then bringing to bear not only issues about gender but other aspects of what we think of as being of interest in terms and significance in terms of the intersectionality of people's identity, experience, life position, and so on. So gender, age, religious beliefs or worldviews, ethnicity, and so on. So that bringing together of a number of different factors, I think, is a real strength of this project and the findings. And perhaps my comments will relate primarily to scholarship, but also make some links through to policy and practical applications as well. I think also, in conjunction with these broader social factors and relationships as being important context for understanding the specificities of the lived experience in the context of and building up a picture of wider social norms and cultural practices, I think the focus on relational experience within families is also very important and an important contribution. Thinking about family position, thinking about family structures, thinking about relationships within the wider community, and also thinking about intergenerational differences. I really value that in the report. But these factors are also effectively linked through to issues about social outcomes and policy as well, which are really important. But before I say a little bit more about that, I just wanted to highlight the issue of Caringscapes and Carescapes. And this perhaps links more to another presentation I heard Ruth give a couple of months ago in Edinburgh about the project, where she was talking about the methodologies and the care within the research team that are grounded in the feminist ethics of care, which draw attention to the vulnerabilities that people may experience, but also what those might bring to the project as well, and through providing support for thinking not only about those who are respondents within the project, but also thinking about a mutual ethos of care and responsibility to one another as researchers. And again, I really applaud that, and I think it's a model of research and also broader practice to replicate. I think that there were some questions that the proposal raised for me. I think the initial presentation suggests that there's a distinction between individual studies and social studies, and I think we have to be careful about taking the individual out of the social context and assuming that those two are unrelated, and not to over-egg that a little bit, because whether we're whatever we're talking about, it's your individual stories and accounts and quotes illustrate beautifully through giving voice to the participants in the project. These shed light on what we understand of social experience, of social ties, social norms, and wider cultural practices, and so on. And the focus on urban issues is interesting because it made me think, well, what do we know about how that relates to rural practices, and what are the particularities of these urban contexts? What's specific to the qualities of the urban context? And I'm sure that probably the team have things that they could respond to about that. But I was thinking, for example, about Christine Dunn's work on mourning rituals in southern Tanzania and the obligations for the mourners to actually undergo discomfort as a sign of their respect, and that this means foregoing what are considered to be comforts like mosquito bed nets, which obviously means putting the mourners themselves at risk, and those sort of social norms. So this is another example of work in an African context, but a different focus. And this is part of a special issue of Geographies in Death and Dying that's coming out in Social and Cultural Geography, several of the papers, I think including Chris's paper, of which is online at the moment. And I think the focus on intergenerational issues, it has been really important in this project in highlighting dependency issues. And again, these can be mapped into a UK context, for example, when people might lose pension rights or housing rights or so on. But what we see here very strongly is the acute nature of access to resources. So I really welcome this report and look forward to other comments and discussion to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Avril. Thanks very much.
Fallo njarem gerem nalla hono godo bite mawra dam tabbi do dumen on amni ma